Greetings, everyone. Once again, it's Brother Mota Mwanidi sharing the authentic truth brought to us by Zulula 100, the only teacher. The message today is Christ died at what age according to the current Bibles? Many people ask questions about when did Christ died, how old was he? And some will say 33 years of age. Some people will try to count the Passovers to try to calculate the length of his ministry and to try to calculate how old was the Christ when he died. Because the Passover was celebrated supposedly, according to the current Bibles, on the first month of every year. So they will try to count the number of Passovers to try to calculate the length of his ministry and how old he was. But you have to understand that these people, they have no spiritual substance. They are not mandated. They have no basic understanding of the scriptures, of the text, of the prophecies. There's only one teacher, Zulula 100. And you're told in Proverbs 19:2, the lack of knowledge is not good for any spirit of man of the original race. And in John chapter 8, verse 32, and you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So, when we go in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 5, so this message is going to be in the current Bibles, and Zulula 100 revealed to us the age that Christ died, even according to the current Bibles. And like I've mentioned, in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 5, it says this: the Passover to the Lord begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month, period. So the Passover, it was supposedly to celebrate, to commemorate the exit of Egypt of the Jews, of the Israelites. But I've already shared the teaching that the Passover, that celebration, that feast, it is diabolical, it's evil. Because the slavery of the Jews in Egypt never took place. It is a made-up narrative. It never happened. It's a lie. It's a falsification of history. So the supposed celebration to commemorate that has no place because it's fake. But nevertheless, we will give you the age in the current Bibles. When you go in Numbers chapter 9, verse 1 to 2, it says, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the first month of the second year, after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Israel keep the Passover at this appointed time. So it was to be celebrated in the first month every year. And that's what many people will try to use to count the age of Christ according to the current Bibles. Now, when we go in Numbers chapter 8, verse 23 and 24, you're told, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this is what pertains to the Levite. This is what pertains to the Levite. So this was a law. This was a recommendation for the Levite. And the Christ was a Levite. He was a priest. Because physically, from the flesh, he is from Mary. And Mary, she also was a Levite because her cousin Elizabeth, she was from the lineage of Aaron. So she was also a Levite. It's not like the fake pastors will claim that, no, the Christ is the line of the tribe of Judah. He is a descendant of David. That's completely made up. That's completely false. They don't understand the scriptures. The Christ, he was a Levite. So the Levites were priests. And here you're told in Numbers chapter 8, verse 23 and 24, this is what pertains to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, one may enter to perform service in the work of the tabernacle of meeting. So this was a law after Aaron, because Aaron himself did not start at 25 years old. Now, when you go in Luke chapter 3, verse 23, you're told, now Christ himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, at about. So why is the person who's writing this saying about when supposedly he should have the Holy Spirit? The Holy Spirit is not the spirit of estimation, of perhaps, maybe. No. The Holy Spirit is the spirit of precision. So it was about 30 years of age has no place. It should not be there. You're not supposed to say about 30 years of age if you have the Holy Spirit. But you have to understand that those who have written the current Bibles, they knew that it was from 25 years of age that a Levite had to start his ministry. That's why they've said at about 30 years of age. And like I've mentioned, many will count the Passover, they will count the Passovers to calculate the age of the Christ and the duration of his ministry. Now, when you go in John chapter 2, verse 13, you're told. In the New King James Version, now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Christ went up to Jerusalem. So this is the first Passover. When you go in John chapter 2, verse 23, Berean Bible, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the signs he was doing and believed in his name. So this was still the first Passover according to the current Bibles. Now so he started at 30, so the first Passover, so now he's 31. John chapter 6, verse 4, New King James Version. Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. Period. So this is the second Passover, so 32 years old. Period. So 32 years old. John chapter 11, verse 55, New King James Version. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover, to purify themselves. So this is the third Passover, so 33 years old. John chapter 18, verse 39. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Period. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews? So this is the fourth Passover according to the current Bible. So he was 34 years old. So some people are going to stop there in regard to the Passovers, and they're going to say he was 34 years of age. But there was other Passovers, but did they put it in? Did they count? Did they mention them? But Christ did not die at 34 years of, he did not die at 34 years old. Because when you go in Numbers, chapter 8, verse 25, you're told, and at the age of 50 years, they must cease performing this work, and shall work no more. So this was the law regarding the Levites. So Christ knew that law. Christ was a Levite, he was a priest. He was from that lineage according to the flesh because his mother, Mary, she was a Levite. So he knew that law, he applied that law. So it was at 50 years of age that he had to leave the visible, he had to end his ministry. So at 50 years old, when he was 50 years old, he was still on earth. And then he died, and then he resurrected. But when he died and resurrected, we no longer count his age. So it was not 33, it was not 34, he was not 30 years. He did 50 years on earth. And for that, when you go in John chapter 8, verse 57, you're told, then the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham, ? So here the Jews ask him a question because Christ told them that you see that in John 8, that he saw Abraham. So they asked him, they answered him, they asked him, you are not yet 50 years old and you have seen Abraham. Because in their understanding, in their logic, they knew the law. They knew that the Christ was a Levite, and they knew that as a Levite, his ministry had to end at 50 years of age. And they knew that Abraham left the visible, so he was on the other side. And for them, for Christ to be able to see Abraham, he also had to leave the visible. You see? And for him, in order for him to leave the visible, he had to finish his ministry. And for him to finish his ministry, it is at 50 years of age, at 50 years old. That's why they asked him, you're not yet 50 years old and you have seen Abraham? You see, because they knew the law. They knew he was reaching 50 years. Why didn't they say, you're not yet 30 years old, you're not yet 35, you're not yet 40 years old? Because those were coded words. So in their, like I've mentioned, in their logic, Christ had to leave the visible to see Abraham. And for him to leave the visible, it is at 50 years that he had to finish his ministry. That's why they were asking him, you're not yet 50 years old. And they knew he was a Levite, and that was the law regarding their ministry, regarding their work. So the Christ was 50 years old when he left the visible, when he died. That's the revelation that we received from Zula 100, the only teacher. He is the only one mandated to teach us regarding the scriptures, regarding the prophets, the patriarch, because he is the revelation. He revealed the action. So that was the message. All glory be to Luba, the only and unique creator.